man out, stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith & Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there'd be as many players out there if there was no booth? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make sick figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers? What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would've caused him to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, how much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have change filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at the house instead of the stop? Or Ali never got bopped by the cops? What if the little homie Easy didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? I don't know. What if? What if?
welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening.
Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Welcome. Today we have a very rich program. We will start by discussing race relations in America, during which we will show what exactly happened to blacks beyond the Civil War. We will also take a look at, of course, what's going on in the country today. It's the road to 2020, where more than a dozen Democrats trying to unseat the current president from the Oval Office. We will also touch on anti-Semitism, an issue that has come back to the surface after a number of tweets exchanged between Ilhan Omar and a few other people across the nation. Those and other issues will be discussed shortly. You are on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense.
After reading several books based on presidents and on Obama specifically, I found that they're typically partisan. The Obama legacy targets the heart of the issue by giving credit to the president where it's due, but definitely coming down hard on Obama on his bigger failures, like his handling of the Syrian crisis.
If you are in college, going to college, you are an educator, a faculty member, or someone with interest in government or politics, the Obama Legacy is definitely a book to read.
My professor recommended the Obama Legacy.
A friend actually recommended the Obama Legacy.
I would highly recommend this book for anyone, whether for academic use or leisure reading.
I would recommend this book to anyone out there searching for an impartial and unbiased look into Barack Obama's tenure as president.
I would definitely recommend this book as a good read for both liberals and conservatives.
We begin today discussing race relations in America. If you join us for the first time, welcome. And we also will take this time to encourage you to visit the People Branch YouTube channel, which is a place where we have archived topics that we've already discussed on this program, and also you can browse to find other topics of interest. Now those steps on the screen will help you to get to the People Branch YouTube channel, and once you're there you can browse for either war on blacks, race relations, institutionalized racism, if your topic of interest is race relation in America. And while you're there, I strongly encourage you to subscribe to the People Branch YouTube channel. By subscribing, it will provide us the opportunity to send you invites, to send you updates, and also to keep you abreast of the activities we have here on the Fourth Branch program. I hope you take the time to browse through and also to subscribe to the channel. We'll be right back. Now, for those of you who have not watched this program before, War on Blacks is a venue in which we discuss race relation in America. Now, because, of course, if you know, then you are at a disadvantage, because we have already gone through many different episodes of this program. We started during the period of slavery to understand the relation, the dynamic between blacks and whites, and we have been making our ways trying to understand this type of dynamic, how it has changed, and where we are at this point. Now, with the announcement that you've received on your Twitter account or your Facebook, the question is asked: what happens to black beyond the Civil War? And the reason that this is what we use is because we have gone from the period of slavery, during which time we discussed a number of different activities and aspects of the relation, the dynamic between blacks and whites, and we move forward all the way to the end of the Civil War. And as you might know, the Civil War was a turning point in the relation between blacks and white. Turning point because blacks were slaves, especially in the South, and whites who benefited of the slavery, and whites who became rich, who have done accomplished a lot in their lives because of slavery, they did not want to let that go. So we had at that time millions of whites who took one side, which is they wanted to keep slavery, and you also have millions of whites who fought to end slavery. And that has been the premise of what we have been discussing in regards to race relation in America. We said from the very beginning there have always been two very distinct, two major groups of whites in the country. There are those who are racist and who discriminate, and there is no denying that. And there are those who are not racist, who do not discriminate, and in fact some are quite a large number of those individuals are doing everything possible in order to put an end to this practice in the country. And as I explained during the time we were debating the period of slavery, we showed you that there were whites who were so disgusted by the practice that they put their own lives on the line to put an end, to try to put an end to slavery. So we recognize that aspect. Now, having said that, we are trying to understand what happened after the Civil War ended, beyond the slavery, beyond the Civil War, what happened? Because today, almost 150 years later, beyond the Emancipation Act, you may recall that the Civil War erupted because Abraham Lincoln would put an end to the slavery by the Emancipation Act. So the state, which are known as the Confederate States, mostly in the South, did not want to go along with that, so they fought to keep slavery around. So they wanted to split the country, in which that there would be the Confederate State, which would accept and condone and continue to practice slavery, and the Union side, obviously, which was fighting against that, which would not have slavery. But we could only speculate as to what life would be today if the Confederate State were to succeed. We don't have to. because there were enough whites, enough people with rationale, enough people who have an understanding of mankind, enough people who took the right side of history, who fought against those who wanted to keep slavery around. Now, you would think beyond slavery, Emancipation Act, all blacks were freed. Then why are we talking about war on blacks today? Now, for those of you who have not watched any of the previous video, or who may even be asking the question, which war on blacks, you might, if you watch this program at the very beginning, you may have seen that there were a couple of clips in which we show you pictures of one picture had a police officer with a machine gun pointing at protesters, and that actually happened, you may recall, maybe in 2014, 2015, after Michael Brown was gunned down by a police officer in Ferguson, Missouri. There were a lot of protests on the street, and it was during that time that the famous picture you saw of the police officer, that big belly police officer you saw standing in the middle of the street with a machine gun pointing. He was pointing that machine gun at black protesters in the street of America. So when people ask me the question, which war on blacks, you ask yourself the very question. On the street of America, you have blacks protesting exactly that kind of problem. Another individual, black individual, which was just gunned down by a police officer, and what do you see? Another police officer with a machine gun, his hand on the trigger just at any moment, just to pull the trigger. Which war on blacks, you ask? Now, the other picture you saw was that black man, which was also there at that time to protest, had six well-dressed, you would call really military equipment and uniform, mask on, have 6 machine gun pointed at a black man, unarmed black man. And you ask yourself, which war on blacks? Now that brings me to the very reason we use the banner war on blacks. Now, as you might know, war suggests casualties, and that is actually the very point that we're trying to bring to the surface during the discussion of race relations in America, to point to those outcomes whenever that there are blacks and there are law enforcement. It's almost a guarantee that there would be some casualties. Now, I mentioned that when we use the war, we do not simply refer to physical casualties. We mentioned there are psychological casualties, there are emotional casualties, and there are also financial casualties. Now, all that happened anyway, and we did give example of each one of them as to how those casualties happen. Now, for instance, for financial casualties, when a police officer gunned down an unarmed black man, it doesn't just end a life, but it also impact that individual's family. That person could have been the breadwinner. Automatically, here is financial casualty. Now there's going to be a lot of struggle for that family to make ends meet, even to become something later, because it could have been that individual trying to make certain that his kids go to school, go to college, become do better in life. Now he's that individual just gunned down by a police officer. So yes, there are financial casualties. Now the emotional casualties and the psychological casualties should be pretty obvious as to what those are when someone loses a loved one, especially in circumstances like that. Those come almost naturally. Despite all that I just mentioned, we have put our focus not so much on what been happening on the physical casualty, on all the different casualties we just mentioned, but we've been putting our focus mostly on what we call institutionalized racism. And the reason is because all those scenarios that we just provided to you can only happen, are only possible because of institutionalized racism. Now, what does that mean? Now, racism in general is when you have one individual, usually a white individual, either actions or language or thought towards another individual which are based almost exclusively on external factors, which usually mean skin color. In other words, my neighbor next door doesn't know anything about me but may not like me because I'm black. Now the person I meet on the train, at the school, at the workplace, etc., only expresses his feeling, his or her feeling towards me, not because of anything other than external factors, which is skin color. Now, I mentioned many times here that it doesn't matter to me whether someone likes me or doesn't like me because I happen to be black, because it doesn't change anything. It doesn't do anything to me. But I am concerned about institutionalized racism because what it does is it perpetuates the behavior, the language, the actions that's why 150 years beyond slavery, after the emancipation, we're still talking about racism in America. And it doesn't happen just by sheer accident. It is something that is perpetuated by institutionalized racism. It is something that we will continue to talk about, and we did give some example of that. So that's why I encourage you to visit the People Bunch YouTube channel and browse through this topic if you are interested not only in race relation in America, this topic, but also if you want to catch up with where we are, because we are moving forward with the discussion and try to now get to this this contemporaneous time, and use contemporaneous examples and circumstances in order to look at either progress or lack of it that we have made since the Emancipation Act beyond the Civil War. So as such, if we ought to make any progress in this aspect, we definitely ought to understand this dynamic, what happened and why we continue to have this problem. Because no man is born racist. No human being, not a single individual, is known to be born racist. It is a learned behavior that we acquire from our environment, at home, maybe in our community, the school we go to, etc., etc. So in order to solve a problem, we have to understand the problem, and we also have to be able to get to the roots of the problem, and hopefully we will be able to put an end to the problem. You are on the fourth branch, the place for common sense. We'll be right back.
Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. In the summer of 2014, there was a fight between Israel and the Palestine. Now, fighting between Israel and fighters in that region, commonplace. It's been going on for decades now. But one particular aspect of that fight caught our attention. In the heat of the fight, there were a lot of casualties on the Palestine side. Now, needless to point out why. Israel is well armed. The Palestine pretty much using still very rudimentary weapon. But something happened during that time that again caught our attention. While Israel was bombing pretty much all different areas where it was suspected that fighters were hiding, one particular location came to the attention of the fighters from the Israel side. And it seems, however, that the United Nations got word of that, but it seemed that Israel was prepared to bomb a building. And it so happened that particular building had was used as shelter for those who were fleeing the fight or fleeing this becoming victimized by maybe some stray bullets or what have you. And children, women, and of course civilians in general were hiding in that building. In fact, there were a couple of UN workers in that building as well. Now, because UN got the information, however, the information was passed, but UN got the information and admonished those making decision in Israel not
to bomb that building. They called not once and talked to someone making the decision to give the green light to bomb that building. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, but 18 times. Yes, you heard correctly. 18 times UN was on the phone with those who were making decision in Israel to give the green light to bomb a building where civilians were hiding, taking shelter during the war. 18 times Israel was made aware that that particular building only had civilians. Now, if you guess where I'm going with that, you would be right. Israel bombed the building. Women, children, bodies were flown, broken into pieces, and those who survived would never be the same. It wasn't an accident of war. It was a deliberate act by Israel. And a couple of UN members also died. 18 times Israel received information that that particular building sheltered civilians. When the United Nations attempted to call Israel to answer for the crime, Israel flashed the anti-Semitism card. Just recently, in 2018, 135 civilians were gunned down again by the armed forces of Israel. Those are not isolated cases. Those are repeated pattern by the state of Israel towards Palestine. Which begs the question, how could a people who complain about having suffered so greatly under the iron fist of Adolf Hitler could justify doing exactly the same thing to another people? Those, as I mentioned, are not isolated cases. Those are predicaments that happen on a regular basis in the Middle East. Israel, having much war power, can easily crush any uprising by any fighter in the Palestine. But what always caught our attention is not so much fight, because at war there are always going to be casualties. Is the deliberate action by Jewish leaders to kill civilians. Exactly the same thing that the world complained that happened to the Jews in Germany during the time Adolf Hitler was the Chancellor of Germany. And every time that the world wants to bring Israel to answer for its crime, it is usually shielded by most Western organizations, most Western countries rather, in general, but United States in particular. In other words, United States has always been an accomplice in the crime committed by Israel towards the Palestinians. But at every step, at every corner, Israel flashed the anti-Semitism card. Which brings us to the question, what is anti-Semitism? Today, we begin a series in which not only we will debate anti-Semitism, but we will bring to you history of Israel and why Israel has been at war with the Palestine and who is at fault and what can possibly be done to solve this lingering problem in the Middle East. You see, anti-Semitism, the short, the simple version, simply means hatred for the Jews. A couple of weeks ago, the leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, passed a resolution on anti-Semitism, racism, Islamophobia, and everything that has to do with hatred. That particular resolution was passed after Ilhan Omar, a congresswoman representing the 5th district in the state of Minnesota, had sent out tweets which are construed to be anti-Semitic. Now, I don't have to rehash those tweets for you because they're readily available, and we also talked about those for a couple of weeks now. So the resolution was passed in order to condemn anti-Semitism, to condemn racism, to condemn all form of hatred in the House, I suppose. And Mrs. Omar was brought to the spotlight because of the comment that she made. And the particular comment that seems to have suggested the passing of the resolution was that she said it's all about the Benjamin. Now, the context is Mrs. Omar was pointing to the fact that the support that Israel received in Washington from the congressmen, from the senators, she seems to suggest that because of lobbying groups which give money to senators on both sides, both Democrats and Republicans, the congressmen on both sides, Democrat and Republican, and she suggested with the tweet, that's the reason there is so much support for Israel. And for the first time in the history of America, there was what we can call a common ground, not just in Washington, but across the country. I never seen so many people agreeing with one thing. Republicans condemned the statement. Journalists wrote against the statement about the need to chastise Ilhan Omar. Glenn Greenwald in particular wrote an article entitled Ilhan Omar is the Steve King of the left. Now, I've already debated all that. I've already responded, provided a rebuttal for that particular that specific article by Glenn Greenwald, which you can find on the People Branch YouTube channel. If you go to the People Branch YouTube channel, you will find that I already provided a rebuttal for that particular article written by Glenn Greenwald in regards to Ilhan Omar being the Steve King of the left. Now, The passing of the resolution is meant to not just to condemn, but Republicans wanted Nancy Pelosi to go as far as not just condemning anti-Semitism, but to mention Ilhan Omar in the resolution, because they said, well, we mentioned Steve King when we pass our resolution and condemning him. Now, without trying to spend too much time digressing about that, let me point out one particular aspect of the conversation. Ilhan Omar has been in Washington for a couple of months. Steve King had been in Washington since 2003. And only in January of 2019 that finally members of his party decided to do something. It's not that Steve King was never showing or talking or using racial languages. He has been doing that for over a decade now, 15 years to be exact. There was never any pushback until January of 2019. So the very idea of comparing Ilhan Omar with Steve King is really outrageous. Now, having said that, let's go back to our discussion. What is anti-Semitism? As I just mentioned, it is in its simplest form hatred for the Jews. Now, we can go as far back as during Adolf Hitler time and as far as Germany to find that, yes, it is really deep hatred for the Jews. History let us tell us that at least at the very least 6 million Jews were slaughtered in Germany. This is as much hatred as you can get. So nobody is condoning anti-Semitism. Nobody is embracing anti-Semitism. But we have to put the logic where it's at. Number one, when Mrs. Omar mentioned the lobbying group, nobody can deny that it's true. In America, we have many several lobbying groups, and that always trying to get the attention of senators and congressmen. And the Jewish organizations are not exempt either. They do the same thing as well. So the question is, when Mrs. Omar said it's about the Benjamin, what was that anti-Semitic? Now, judging by all the condemnation from people from all walks of life, it seems so, but is it? Right after the 2014 war between Israel and the Palestine, I published an article under the title Flashing the Anti-Semitism Card, which you can find on the peoplebranch.org. That's the website in which I published that article. And the reason I did is because it seems that there is a misunderstanding as to what is really anti-Semitism. Now, I cannot read Mrs. Omar's heart. I cannot say that she hates Jews. But if we judge by the sentence, by the statement that she made, and we put it in its context, I can say two things about the reaction that we got. in its context, Mrs. Omar was pointing to the fact that Israel gets as much support that Israel gets from congressmen, senators in Washington, both Democrats and Republicans, because of lobbying. No one can deny that indeed, not just Israel, but not just Jewish organizations, but many organizations across the world have lobbyists in Washington trying to get legislation, trying to get foreign policy that benefits that country. That is nothing new. Everybody knows that. And the Jewish organization have been doing an excellent job doing just that. Now, in that context, I'm still at a disadvantage trying to understand what is anti-Semitic about saying that. One. And second, it seems that the passing of the resolution did just the opposite of what it intended, or rather supports the very point that Mrs. Omar was making. Because when she said it's about the Benjamin, the context, that lobbying group lobbied congressmen, senators, so that they can have a friendly legislation, foreign policies towards Israel. And that is the context. And the context is to not just towards Israel, and the context is for every lobbying group that tried to do the same thing for their respective country. But it seems the word anti-Semitism has different meaning for the United States of America, for the Western countries in particular. It seems that anti-Semitism signifies anything that's said that's not flattering, that's not positive toward Jews or Israel will be anti-Semitic. And I don't say that for being cocky, for being corny, because so far that's what it seems. Example. We have many other lobbying groups for different countries that may not receive the type of support that Israel received from in Washington. We even have senators, congressmen who would oppose or would not speak good of those countries. Now let's take a very known example. Marco Rubio, during the time that Obama was in the Oval Office, tried to reestablish relations with Cuba, and Marco Rubio opposed that with all his strength. He opposed that, and he didn't have anything good to say about that initiative that the Obama administration took to reestablish relationship with Cuba. Marco Rubio happened to be descendant of that country. And as far as he's concerned, there is nothing good about Cuba. There is no reason to establish relationship. Now, if we were for one split second to take Marco Rubio and move him from Cuba to Israel and making the exact same statement towards Israel instead of towards Cuba, would Marco Rubio be considered anti-Semitic? That's the question. In other words, when statements are made that's not flattering towards Israel, automatically Israel flashes the anti-Semitism card. But what makes it worse is because here in the United States, it seems to be that anything that's said about Israel, unless it is positive, it is anti-Semitic. At least that's what I got from this from this first time amazing come together of the country to condemn one particular issue, anti-Semitism. Again, I want to be certain that everybody understands that nobody is saying anti-Semitism is good. Nobody is promoting anti-Semitism. Nobody embraces anti-Semitism. But it seems that that's the impression that I have, that every time that there is something that's said that's not positive towards Israel or the Jews, automatically it's anti-Semitic. As I mentioned before, I start talking about that. In the summer of 2014, Israel committed what you would consider war crimes, because it wasn't by accident that Israel bombed a civilian location. But when called to answer for its crime, they flashed the anti-Semitism card. Now, is it anti-Semitic to call Israel to answer for its crime? And that's the question. Because the action that Israel did in the summer of 2014 by bombing a civilian location, knowingly, that wasn't an accident. Israel knew. Israel was contacted and was admonished 18 times. This is no small matter. 18 times you were told that that location only has civilian. So what Israel is doing, contrary to Germany that slaughtered Jews 6 million in a matter of just a small amount of time, what Israel has been doing is been slaughtering the Palestinian over decades, many decades, and the rest of the world has been saying it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, because every time that Israel ought to be brought to answer for its crime, the anti-Semitism card is flashed. It's not anti-Semitic to force Israel to answer for its crime. This conversation, we will continue it as we will show you the birth of Israel and what has happened ever since. And you can judge for yourself what is exactly anti-Semitism and why we continue to shield Israel of its crime committed towards the Palestinian.
Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. Today, we are witnessing history. A number of women running, bidding for the presidency of the United States. As of yesterday, I believe, there are more than a dozen candidates, Democrat candidate that is, bidding for the presidency of the United States and seeking to unseat Donald Trump from the Oval Office. It is my hope that there will also be Republican candidate challenging Donald Trump for the nomination of the Republican Party. That ought to happen. The past couple of years, unless you've been under a rock, you would know that the country has been going through a very tumultuous time. Chaos, scandal, corruption. Someone who ran his campaign under the premise that he's going to drain the swamp not only has done just the opposite, but he's been filling the swamp to its brim. Donald Trump should not have happened to America. But here we are. He's probably one of the few candidates I wrote so much about during the presidential campaign. I started to write about Donald Trump before Donald Trump jumped in the race. And the reason is because something that many may not know is the fact that when Donald Trump proposed to GOP leaders that he would run for office, they were trying to steer him to run for the governorship of New York, which Donald Trump rejected because he had something bigger in mind, the presidency of the United States. And also that's the reason you may have noticed that Donald Trump began his campaign without anyone in the Republican Party. It was just Donald Trump. So he was pretty much on his own. But here we are, Donald Trump is president of the United States. But for those who do not care much about the country, those who claim to be patriots, those who claim to have values, but in reality, we can say with a high degree of certainty that they have none of what they claim to have. Republican Party usually talk about core values.
And if you go into the GOP website, you'll find a list of those core values. But those that I marked, trying to figure out exactly which of those core values that Republicans live by. They call for smaller government, lower taxes, greater personal responsibilities, and the list goes on and on. Family values, high moral and ethical value standard. I mean, those sound like a joke from Saturday Night Live. But that's what Republicans claim to have. Core value. That's their core values. So after 2 years of Donald Trump, it should not be a difficult task for the country to decide to get rid of that individual, because Donald Trump is not just an incompetent individual, but is bad for the country, is bad for future generation, is bad for society. Ironically, Republican legislators for the past 2 years have been doing nothing other than protecting him, defending him. Some even go as far as thinking this is the best thing that has happened to the country since sliced bread. I used to love going to Las Vegas, not for the same reason most other people go to, because I don't gamble. In fact, getting to think about it, I never spent a single penny on those machines in Las Vegas. But I love the ambiance. I love the atmosphere. I love especially during summertime. It's attractive. It's enticing. Now, I did play in the slot machine a couple of times, but it's one of those free things that they give you, of course, to entice you to spend your own money. So of course I tried it and see if I could be lucky and get some money, and once I lose that, I walk away. I'm not enticed by jackpot coming out of machine, people screaming, or at the very least I think it's not an enticing thing to do. But nevertheless, I love the ambiance, and every time I haven't gone there for quite some time now, but when I used to go to Las Vegas, I used to love one particular aspect of all those activities. Actually, two, to get to think about it. One, the shows. Two, the food. In fact, maybe I'm biased, but there are certain places that I went to and ate their food, and the next year I would go to eat that food again. Sounds crazy, but hey. Now, the food, great ambiance. I love walking back and forth and looking at all those, especially at night. It's lovely. I enjoyed going to Las Vegas. The food, the ambiance, but there is another aspect I love, as I mentioned, is the show. But the show that usually attract me, for some reason I'm attracted to this magic thing. You know, when you hear that the magician gonna do something that really blow your mind, it's magic. Seeing an individual being put in a box and the magician will cut the person in half. You see the leg on one side, the upper body on another side, and you're like, wow. All that is deception. None of that is true. Of course, I know that, but nevertheless, I still like watching it. I still like it. I don't know. I have some attraction towards seeing someone performing those type of shows. And the other aspect I love is a magician that calls someone on the stage that has a bill, a dollar bill, $5, $10, $20 bill, and would make that money disappear from that individual and show up in somebody else in the audience. Those type of magical trick always fascinate me. But I also realize they just deception. You heard the hands are faster than the eyes, and those people who do those kind of trick, they're very good at it. They can get the audience to focus on this hand while the other hand, which is not too visible, doing something, because they're very adept. They very good at doing that. But it's all part of the show. It's all part of the deception. I say all that to bring the following to the conversation. Republicans are very good. I mean, they master the art of deception. It's almost as if I don't know if they go to school for it. I cannot explain it, but they extremely good at deception. And in order for a deception to be of any use, you have to have an audience that accepts it, that believes it, right? Because that's our whole point. Magician would not make money in Las Vegas if there were not enough people talking about the magic act and tell other people about it so that other people can go and watch the show. And Republicans have mastered that, the art of deception. And that's the reason that they have managed to keep their jobs for decades, although they're not doing anything for the constituent. Because despite the fact I mentioned earlier that I know those people, when they perform their magic trick, I know it's a trick, there is nothing magic about it, and yet I still enjoy it. I still would not mind seeing it again and again and again and again, which means I will still have to pay for it in order to see it again. Despite that, I still go and watch, which get me to understand why Republicans are legislators, that is, why they are so successful at deceiving the constituent and yet manage to continue to get the vote and the support of the constituent. Because I know it's not any magic, it's a trick. But I enjoyed it. I still continue to watch it. So the Republican legislators, they have for decades what happening in today with the Trump administration is not anything new. Trump is not the master of deception. Trump is smart, is what, in fact I mentioned that before and I'll mention it again. Trump was so smart when he bid for the presidency of the United States that he chose to run as a Republican. And that wasn't an accident. Trump is very smart when he mingled with all those different people in Washington before, and he watch, he listen, and he's able to, because that's what people who con other people, that's what they do. They able to quickly figure out who are most susceptible to be conned or to accept another con. It's the Republicans. Despite what you hear Republicans have been saying about Democrats, Democrats have their fault, but Donald Trump would have never ever succeeded running as a Democrat. That's why he chose to run. Donald Trump is naturally a Democrat. All his views before he bidded for the presidency of the United States are Democrats' views. There's nothing Republicans about Donald Trump, and yet he knew that that was the only way for him to have a chance of going far, bidding for the presidency of the United States. He knows that the Republican Party welcome people who do those kind of things. People with corruption, people in scandal, people who scheme other people. Now that's not an assumption. All the people who voted Donald Trump in office knew Donald Trump was a con man. Those are not things that are hidden. They expose documents, court documents. They all available to everybody. And during the campaign, that all of those people, they heard all those things. People that Donald Trump have defrauded, business people. Donald Trump have defrauded people who went to his school, and he has filed bankruptcy 7 times. So those are not new information to the people who voted for Donald Trump, which means they welcome, they embrace people who scam others, they embrace people who scheme others, they embrace con men. And it was initially by the constituent, but as you saw, as time went by, you have also legislators, the GOP elite, all of them surrounding Donald Trump. Republicans are masters of deception. They don't have to do anything for the country. They deceive their constituent, but they're so good at doing it that the constituent seems to be okay with it. Just like I mentioned to you, I go to Las Vegas to watch those people doing magic trick, although I know there is no magic in it. But contrary to me, who enjoy a magic trick, the deception the Republicans use are detrimental to the country, are detrimental to future generations. That makes a big difference in life. Now, I try to explain to individuals that there is a big difference between when you hear, for instance, in the list of core values I provided earlier, you show that you seen, for instance, something like lower taxes. Now, we know it is deception. And how do we know that? Is because the lower taxes benefit the wealthy, rich individual. Now, that is not to say when they say lower taxes, the deception part is because they make the masses, the constituent, believe that they're gonna get lower taxes, when in reality just the opposite happened to us. We the people, the masses, we the one that pay the price. We don't get any low taxes. For those who thought the $1.5 trillion was a windfall, some of you already found out that you have to pay back what you got. It's lower for the large corporation and wealthy individual because they don't have to pay anything back. So in a sense, Republicans are masters of deception, because when they were crafting that legislation, it wasn't an accident that they gave the larger portion to large corporation and wealthy individual. It wasn't an accident that they give crumbs to the masses. And it wasn't an accident that they crafted legislation such that we the people, we and we alone are responsible to pay that loan back. That's what deception does. So they deceive the masses, but the masses believe that they're getting something. You know, the magic trick. They say, you're going to receive a tax cut, while the hand underneath saying, you're going to have to pay that back, you know. But there is also something else that Republicans are very good at. But that is something that I cannot comprehend how Republican constituents go along with it. It's scaring the crap out of the constituent. So Republican legislators use two approaches to continue to stay in Washington, to continue to keep their job. One, they deceive the constituent, and two, they scare the hell away from the constituent. How do they do that? You may recall, for instance, that during the Obama tenure, Republicans were out there drumming the beat that Obamacare is a death panel. You remember that? Everywhere you turn to. In fact, Fox amplified the message. Obamacare is a death panel. If you accept Obama to pass that act, your grandparents are going to be killed. Remember that? And to up the ante, they said, you know what else is going to happen? Obamacare is going to kill jobs. Now, it is both deception and scare tactic. And the reason I say that is because Republican legislators knew that what they were saying was untrue, were false, but they also knew that the constituent would simply swallow everything that they say and would help them defeat the idea of passing a health care that would protect more people, that would provide insurance to more people. Sometimes I have to ask myself, what exactly do Republicans want for the country? What do they want for the constituent? Now, if you think about it clearly, why do you think the Republicans do not stand for the rule of law? Caroline Kennedy said that the bedrock of our democracy is the rule of law. And Republicans always claim to be this protector, those people who protect the country from enemies. And yet, every chance that they have, they prove to be just the opposite. Now, the reason that you have so many Republicans siding and calling what Mueller is doing a witch hunt is because the Republican legislators have joined force with Donald Trump instead of doing the job for which they were elected, which is to hold Donald Trump accountable. But because they know their constituents would go along with any deception, so they side with the conmen in the Oval Office. And what do they get? They say, see, I protect the conmen. So when a re-election comes, remember, that's exactly what Mitch McConnell is doing. Because how do you explain a legislative branch whose job is to make sure that the executive branch doesn't go out of its boundaries, let that happen? Why do you think that is happening? It's because the constituent don't care, and in fact the constituent would prefer Donald Trump to continue doing what he's doing. They voted him in office, but the legislative body is responsible to make certain that we protect the integrity of the nation, we protect the integrity of the Constitution. So if a president is the executive branch is running amok, it is the duty, the constitutional duty of the legislative body to put an end to that problem. And yet, all the Republicans, including the Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, just let it go. Guess why? Not because they love the country, not because they're patriot. In fact, just the opposite is true. It's because they let the conmen do whatever the conmen want to do, and this way they can ensure they keep their job, because they tell you, see, I protect the individual you like. And it doesn't matter that he is destroying the country. It doesn't matter that he is trampling the rule of law. We protect him, so make sure you vote us back in office. That's all it is, not because they love the country, not because they are patriot, but because they see the only way to keep their job is to do that. Which brings me to the question, why did they even bother to become a congressman or a senator? I listened to a few people the other day making a case as to why Republicans letting all those things happen. And the case the individual was making by saying that, you know, those people, they are human beings too. They have a job, they have to feed their family, and they have to keep the job. Now that sounds logical, doesn't it? Because if you have a job, you'll do anything to keep your job. But a public servant is not just any type of job. Nobody forces anyone to run for public office. That's number one. And number two, you know, the highest duty of a congressman, of a senator, is to the country, is to protect the Constitution of the country. There is no if and but about it. So if you thought there would be a point where you could not do that job, then you should not have gone for that job. So I don't have any sympathy for anyone telling me those people are human beings today supposed to keep their job. The job is to protect the Constitution of the United States. It's like telling me that someone enlists in the armed forces, and then all of a sudden the person is in the battlefield, but the person is thinking, oh my God, what if I get killed? I leave behind wife and kids. Would you accept that as a rationale? Of course not. Because the very point of enlisting in the armed forces is so that when you are deployed, you know it is possible that you might die. But when you're in the battlefield, you cannot be reasoning that, you know what, I cannot get killed because I have left behind 2 kids. the rationale is not acceptable, because we would not accept that our soldiers on the battlefield would stop fighting because they leave behind wife and kids. We would ask that they fight so that they can win, even at the cost of their lives. So the idea that congressmen or senators, they have family to feed, then they should not be in the job that they have. They should remove themselves from the job so that other people who know that's what the job entails can get the job done. Now, the reason that they so emboldened and they continue to do that is because the masses, their constituents, continue to accept them not to do their job. As such, hey, why do they have to?
In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies presented to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore.
Thank you very much for spending the time with me. I hope those information were useful to you. If you have any question, comment, suggestion, please do not hesitate to contact us. Should you have a topic you would like us to talk about, let us know. We will research it. We will debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.
Very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
somehow stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith & Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there'd be as many plays out there if there was no boost? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make six figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers? What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would've caused him to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, how much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have change filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at a house instead of a stop? Or Ali never got bopped by the cops? What if the little homie EZ didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on?